What can you do with a building after it's lived its first life? We spend a lot of time designing buildings for their first use, but very rarely do we ask what happens after. After the people leave, after the program changes, after the building outlives the moment it was designed for. Does it become obsolete? Or does it become available? This project imagines a second life, not as a replacement, but as a continuation. But let's go back to where it all started. An idea I had in my head of a place that could serve the community. When I was a kid, in the 80s, I loved breaking to Electric Boogaloo. You've probably heard of it because of the meme or the name or whatever, but back then, I loved it for the simple reason that I loved breakdancing. But looking back at it now, I realized there was something else in that movie that stuck with me. Not the plot or the performances, but the idea of a place called Miracle. A building that mattered, not because of who owned it, but because of the people who showed up to protect it. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it belonged to the community that needed it. So most of my work today is for private clients, developers, institutions, churches, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but every once in a while, a question from much earlier in life comes back to me. What happens when a privately built place, one designed for gathering, gets a chance to belong to its community in a different way? So the building I'm using for this project started out as a church that I designed. It was designed to gather people, to hold shared moments and collective attention. But the more I thought about it, the less interested I became in the building as a church, and the more interested I became in the building itself. Its structure, its volume, its ability to bring people together under one roof. So this project isn't about what happens inside a church. It's what happens to a building after it's done being one. What kind of life is possible when the first occupants move on, but the building structure remains? Once I stopped thinking about this as a church, the drawing became more straightforward. I wasn't sketching form, I was sketching usage. At this scale, the building can't be everything. So the goal wasn't complexity, but more about clarity. I started by dividing this plan into zones, spaces that could be used at the same time by different people without competing with one another. The main space stays open, a stage, flexible seating, room to gather. On the right side, the building quieted down a bit. A small library, a craft room, and a flexible space for trainings or group conversations. Towards the back, 2 smaller rooms can support more intimate gatherings. On the left of the building, kitchen becomes a learning space. Not just support, but a destination. And in the back, these existing offices can become an incubator. Co-working or small businesses, entrepreneurship, ideas that need a desk before they need anything else. But to me, these aren't just rooms on trace paper. They're moments. A place where someone can come to knit and hang out with their friends. Not because they have to, but because they finally have a place where they can go. Maybe it's a place to learn a new recipe and to cook alongside someone who knows a little more than you do. Or a place where a new business can start. Small and uncertain, but supported. And finally, a place where kids can dance on stage while their parents sit in the dark watching something take shape. So when I moved into the model, I didn't want to make anything look completely finished. I moved into it to see if the building could actually support the life I was imagining. The first thing I focused on was the volume. How tall does the main space need to be to stay flexible without feeling untouchable? Instead of thinking about rooms, I thought about time. What's open during the day? What comes alive at night? And what can operate without everything else turning on? That meant paying close attention to doors and thresholds and circulation, so different uses can coexist together without interfering with one another. The quiet spaces, they're designed to work when nothing else is happening. Lower ceilings, controlled views, spaces that reward you for staying there longer. And the kitchen, it sits between zones. Active, visible, flexible, it's a bridge between different rhythms in the building. In this area that I'm calling the incubator spaces, they're modest by design. They're not necessarily places you arrive, but they're places where you begin. Now, towards the end of the process, I spent a lot of time on this stage because the original one, it just didn't feel right. The stage was elevated and set apart. It was designed for a single speaker or maybe a group of people, high up and separate from the crowd. But for this building to work, that hierarchy didn't make sense anymore. I brought the stage closer to the ground to give it less distance and less separation. And I started paying more attention to what happens behind it. The rehearsing, the waiting, the movement of actors, maybe helping someone through the nerves. The activity behind the curtain is just as important, sometimes more, than what happens in front of it. Once the model did its job, I stopped pushing it and started looking at the rendering. It isn't about polish, it's about listening, letting the light settle, and letting the materials do less. I wasn't trying to make this feel new, I just wanted it to feel familiar and safe. As you enter the building, you enter without ceremony. It's just a door that's open to you. Maybe you gather here in the lobby, waiting for the grandparents to show up to watch your kids dance. Or maybe you're waiting for your group of friends to get together, to go inside the main room to watch the show. This main space, it gathers people, without asking them to look up at something higher, but to be a part of something. As you walk onto this quieter side, it invites you to stay a little longer than you planned. It wants you to come in and gather and talk and have a conversation. Maybe you have some training so you can now improve yourself. Or maybe in this back room, your D&D group gathers for your weekly adventures. As you progress towards the kitchen, it stays active. It's teaching through doing. It allows you to sit and improve yourself or just become part of something bigger. Food has a way of connecting people, and this kitchen allows for that. As you progress towards the back, this incubator, it stays simple. It's a place to begin. It's a place where ideas can become reality. And in between all of this, there's spaces where conversations can start accidentally, where you just might meet people in your neighborhood. So Break-In 2, Electric Boogaloo, it was a place where people made their own space and they fought to save it from the developers. Here, this building, this design, the idea was to take something that a developer already built, and instead of letting it go away, saving it and reusing it for the community. This project isn't really about reuse or developers versus private entities. It's about stewardship. It's about designing buildings that don't demand permanence, but they can still endure past its original life. Not every building needs to solve a crisis. Some buildings just need to stay available for the user that needs it. It needs to be available to people, and it needs to be available to change, and whatever comes next. Thanks for walking through this with me.